BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to this special Thursday episode of Black Box Online Radio. I started a new segment on the channel this year called the Versus series, where I talk about different criminals and comparing and contrasting their actions. However, that has to be on hold this week because there's a bigger piece of breaking news that I think deserves a response, and that is the conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell, who is somewhat of an ex-girlfriend to Jeffrey Epstein, a man who needs no introduction, perhaps the most famous sexual criminal of the last 15 years, and I don't mean that in any type of lighthearted way. Jeffrey Epstein was an absolutely terrible person who was facing some serious jail time as well as an enormous amount of reputation destruction. His life was ruined more or less, and the official narrative is that he committed suicide in his prison cell by hanging, even though that is highly disputed by some people. But that still left his ex-lover, perhaps is a better term to use, Ghislaine Maxwell, and the reason why I'm so hesitant to label her is because some people say that, okay, they aren't even really lovers, it was purely a business arrangement, and there's a debate about which one of them was more manipulative in the business arrangement. They didn't care about each other at all. They were just both using up each other for connections. You might call that a relationship, or you might simply call that they're two criminals running a very large sex prostitution and sex trafficking ring, nonetheless. But to help us out, we're going to go over to an article from the Washington Post called Ghislaine Maxwell Convicted of Trafficking Girls for Jeffrey Epstein, and this was written by Shayna Jacobs, just citing the source. Ghislaine Maxwell, the longtime paramour of financier Jeffrey Epstein. I do like how it begins with paramour as a way to describe her. Maybe I can say that better. Paramour in a French way. But, I mean, what really is their relationship status? It's kind of uncertain, but still mostly irrelevant at this point. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted on sex trafficking charges after a trial that centered on what types of enabling conduct, including befriending young women girls and teaching and scheduling them to massage an older man, should be considered criminal. Well, absolutely, I think immediately that is a sex crime, that is trafficking, and when you hear the details that the women are sharing about Jeffrey Epstein, it seems that mostly he did very lewd acts with them, that he would want girls who were around the junior high school age to be brought to his residence or wherever he was staying, and he would mostly just expose himself in front of them, and, I mean, this is a little bit graphic, but he would masturbate. He wouldn't even ask them to touch him sexually. Some women definitely do report that he sexually assaulted them, but in most cases it's kind of lewd act with a minor. But the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell is responsible for bringing them there, that is sex trafficking, absolutely. Maxwell, age 60, was accused of recruiting teenage girls to massage Epstein at his homes in Palm Beach, Florida, New York, and New Mexico, and elsewhere between 1994 and 2004. Epstein allegedly paid the girls hundreds of dollars in cash for the massages, which involved sexual touching, which he expected 3 times a day. He died by suicide 28 months ago while awaiting his own trial. The jury found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty on 5 of the 6 counts, including conspiracy to commit sex trafficking and sex trafficking of an individual under the age of 18. No matter what, if Jeffrey Epstein was doing some type of sexual act and a minor was involved, how could she not be found guilty of that? She was found not guilty of enticement of one individual under 17 with the intent to engage in illegal sexual activity. And I know that she's a horribly unpopular individual. She is perhaps a very evil individual, but I have to agree with that ruling because I mean, I just don't believe they would have sufficient evidence to say that she was guilty of enticement of an individual under 17 with the intent to engage in the activities. There have been lots of rumors about that, but you can't convict someone on rumors alone. A unanimous jury has found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty of one of the worst crimes imaginable, facilitating and participating in the sexual abuse of children, said Damon Williams, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. The road to justice has been far too long, but today has been done. And that's the reason why I wanted to talk about this particular subject, because with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, it's all out in the open now. Yet I notice that so many people are still trying to deny that these types of sex crimes happen, because Jeffrey Epstein wasn't somebody who was simply interacting with other criminals in the underworld. He was interacting with very high-ranking politicians, as well as business leaders, and even someone like Prince Andrew, a member of the British royal family. So they are still in somewhat of a state of denial that these types of illegal connections exist, that these types of sex rings exist, and that the global elites practice sex activities that involve human smuggling. And it's not just the kind of gangs and the criminal underlords, it's people that we see on the evening news all the time. There are very nasty things that the global elites do behind closed doors, and it should not be downplayed. Back to the Post article. Allegations about orgies and sex parties with young girls, including on Epstein's private Caribbean island, caused many prominent politicians, business leaders, and celebrities to distance themselves after a 2008 plea deal that resulted in a relatively light one-year sentence for Jeffrey Epstein, which I think was extremely light, and I believe he was even able to leave jail for part of the time. And the island they're talking about is Little St. James in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and some people even called it Lolita Island, because the famous line about that is, Bill Gates flew to meet Jeffrey Epstein and possibly who knows what, but Bill Gates has his own private planes. A billionaire himself. Why does he need to go on Jeffrey Epstein's plane? That goes to show you that there is some type of criminal connection of the global elites. There is some type of criminal sexual networking that goes on with very prominent members of American culture, people that we know about very clearly, whether it's Bill Gates, Donald Trump, or Bill Clinton. I mean, now some people have their own theories about how these types of networks operate in the elite circles, that the reason why they have orgies and they're recruiting underage girls isn't simply because Jeffrey Epstein got off on girls who were around the junior high age. I'm almost certain that he did. In fact, we know for a fact that he did, to the best of our knowledge now. I mean, people were convicted for this, that he was targeting girls of the junior high age. But the reason why some people think that this happens is they lure prominent businessmen, politicians, and anyone under the sun of any importance to these sex parties, these orgies, or getting them involved with an underage girl, and then they have blackmail on them. The person is somewhat useful, they have a certain degree of power and influence, but they're also susceptible to manipulation, and they give in to things like temptation. Then these people can be blackmailed. It's a leverage mechanism. It's not even about completely getting off on being around younger people and such. It is about control, blackmail, and manipulation. And with the Epstein case and Ghislaine Maxwell, all of this came out in the open. I don't think that these things should be controversial, but when you try to talk to people about this subject, they're just like, no, no. It all became a debate about, did Epstein kill himself or not, and there was a very big distraction from the activities of the global elites who are still alive. And by elites, I simply mean people in prominent circles, people who have a concentration of wealth and a concentration of power. Maxwell's trial was viewed by both Epstein's victims and experts outside as an opportunity for prosecutors to do so. Juries began deliberating late on December 20th with a 4-day halt over Christmas. At trial, prosecutors argued that the teenagers who were as young as 14 during their encounters with Epstein expected Maxwell to be a buffer and chaperone between them and the much older millionaire. Now, there are rumors as well, but she wasn't convicted of this. There are rumors that Ghislaine Maxwell was actually participating in the sexual abuse herself. Instead, Maxwell facilitated massage appointments and gave instructions on what Epstein liked. The now grown women said she also sometimes arranged their flights and other travel details when they visited his homes. I mean, that's sex trafficking, absolutely. I mean, that is not only guilty, she is painfully guilty. 3 of the 4 accusers who took the witness stand during the 3-week trial in the U.S. District Court in Manhattan said they were also subjected to unwanted sexual touching by Maxwell herself. Yes, absolutely. I mean, these are the rumors that I was talking about, but how would you go about proving that in a court of law? I mean, sometimes people can be convicted on that if they believe that the witness's testimony is compelling enough, but it also depends on how the lawyers play it out. Maxwell was a sophisticated predator who knew exactly what she was doing, Assistant U.S. Attorney Allison Moe said during a closing statements argument on December 20th. She caused the girls deep and lasting harm. Absolutely. And she is horribly guilty. She's just as guilty as Epstein. She might even be more guilty than Epstein because she facilitated all of this. Defense attorneys for Maxwell presented her as someone whose primary role in Epstein's life was to manage his properties and assist him in his business matters. Yawn. They argued that the accuser's memories have been influenced by years of media coverage focused on Epstein and Maxwell's proximity to him. I don't even know if that's an honest attempt from the defense attorneys. That's almost just like somebody who goes on the show Judge Judy or something like that, or maybe watch the People's Court. They're like, well, it's all someone else's fault. Well, do you have anything else to say? No, not really. That's not even a real defense. No, well, maybe the media put false memories in their head. Baloney. Like, that's not even a good attempt at a legal defense. During cross-examination, the lawyers pressed Maxwell's accusers to admit that they did not tell the authorities about Maxwell's alleged role in the abuse until after Epstein's suicide. I don't care about that at all, to be honest. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. As the victims were beginning to pursue claims against Epstein's estate that ended up totaling in millions of dollars. But now you cannot enter into a world of blame the victim because people do not speak out for a variety of reasons. Number one, they're scared. I mean, someone is not only a billionaire, but has the ability to use that type of money to do horrible things to them. I mean, resources alone would be a reason to be afraid of that person. They're not only rich, but also powerful, and also the connections that they had. And some people enter into a state of powerlessness when they think that this person is just too powerful. I can't do anything about it. No one is going to listen to me. I'm not going to be heard. And the cycles of abuse seem to be very regular and occurring frequently. Like, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And this person thinks that they have less and less of a chance to respond to the claims in a legal way, and they just think that it's a hopeless case, that no one's going to believe them, so they don't speak out and they don't tell the truth. However, if more than one victim can get together and then they can share these stories and someone says, hey, we have to do something about this, well, of course, that's a strength in numbers approach. And, I mean, okay, Epstein's estate that ended up totaling in millions of dollars in settlements, just because that happened, it doesn't mean that the girls are liars. And here's a statement from one of Epstein's attorney, but Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney. The evidence presented at the trial has established exactly what we told you it would do during openings, that the stories relied on by the government are the product of erroneous memories manipulation and money. Now, just because someone isn't able to remember details with 100% accuracy, it does not mean that the abuse didn't happen. In case you can't tell, I'm taking a strong stance. I believe the victims, and this is also something where the other people in these global elite circles who are working with Jeffrey Epstein mostly got off scot-free, and they have a little bit of reputation destruction, but they've healed up rather well. Jurors were given a detailed 80-page jury charge to work from as they considered each of the 6 counts in the indictment. The document was meant to serve as an instruction manual of sorts. It laid out legal definitions of kinds like knowingly and interstate commerce. The jury found Maxwell guilty of conspiracy to entice individuals under the age of 17 to travel in interstate commerce with the intent to engage in illegal sexual activity, conspiracy to transport individuals under 17 to travel in interstate commerce with intent to engage in illegal sexual activity, transportation of an individual under 17, that was only one person, with the intent to do it herself, and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking of individuals under the age of 18. And as previously stated, she was found not guilty of enticement of an individual under 17, that one person, to engage in sexual activity with her. But it doesn't mean it didn't happen, it just simply means that, well, they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And I do have to share something with you, a final note, because so much of the debate was centered on whether or not Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. So many people were like, well, why are you talking about this in the first place? Because the global elites were trying to cover up secrets. Scott Adams, the host of the show Real Coffee and the cartoonist, brought up a very convincing case that Epstein did indeed commit suicide. And I'm going to be very clear, I believe Epstein committed suicide. He did kill himself. I don't buy into the alternative theories, but Scott Adams' convincing case for me was that they found multiple nooses in Jeffrey Epstein's cell, which suggests that he was doing this in a premeditated way. It was a calculated, premeditated measure. It was suicide with intent, and that he had tried multiple times, and one time he was finally successful. And while I don't know everything 100%, I do believe that that is a plausible interpretation of the evidence. And a lot of people were expecting that Ghislaine Maxwell was going to be found dead, that she was going to commit suicide, and I think that they must have amped up the suicide watch around her just so something like this did not happen. Because, I mean, firstly, I don't think anyone would attempt to murder Ghislaine Maxwell, because then no one would believe it. It would look like a setup. It would look like the global elites are just murdering people who are involved with the public eye, and that they just want to silence somebody so it doesn't go to trial and they can just brush the scandal under the rug. That would be a horrible public image nightmare for anybody connected to this Jeffrey Epstein case, and it really seems that they are guilty. It seems that there were better efforts to keep up with suicide watch around Ghislaine Maxwell, but with this outcome, we have to remember this is just the verdict. She was found guilty on 5 of the 6 charges, but she has not been sentenced yet. So this is a time on Black Box Online Radio when I have to admit that we're following the news. We have to wait and see what's going to happen next. And we have to find out the outcome of the sentencing. Some people say that she might get up to 60 years in prison. Other people think that she might get a much lighter sentence. Well, only time will tell for that, but what do you think about this case? Do you believe that the actions of the global elites occur in the way that I described, that there is a type of sexual networking that is used as a blackmail chain of mechanisms, like it's a blackmail intention, and they're able to use that as leverage over certain people, politicians, business people, and there could be certain more sinister acts going on, that people who are actively engaging in these types of sadistic behaviors, and they do it together because they have the same sadistic tendencies. Do you think that any of that is present? And I kid thee not, people do doubt this, even after this stuff has become mainstream news. I mean, the media doesn't want to talk about it too much anymore. They instead, well, it turned into somewhat of a media circus where people were trying to debate, firstly, whether or not Epstein committed suicide, but now that Maxwell has been put on trial and found guilty, but because of the trial, they're just simply trying to anticipate the verdict. Well, what was it going to be? Is she going to be found guilty or not? Okay, she's found guilty, but what about all the other people who were involved? What about all the people that attended these quote-unquote sex parties on Lolita Island? What about all the people who could be in Congress, that could be politicians, that could be senators, that could have direct access to very influential decisions in the United States government and around the world? I mean, Prince Andrew mostly stepped back from any type of public image after all of this came to light. What do you think about any of that? And you can always weigh in on whether or not you think Epstein committed suicide or he was murdered by the global elites. Please feel free to discuss this in the comment section down below. I would love to read any of your comments. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box there. And you can even keep in touch on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88, and I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.